Hey class, this is Brother Libert. Hey, I just wanted to go through probably the most confusing portion of the semester, and it's probably selectors. And really, this is kind of a make it or break it time. If you don't get this, a lot of the rest of the semester can be very problematic. So, I kind of wanted to go through this a little bit. First off, know that this is not the activity. This is just a demonstration using one of the pages that we've been playing with before. So you have it, so you could actually follow along if you want. Second thing I want to say right now is I apologize if you can hear the music majors or the voice lessons below me. My office is in kind of a weird place, and I get to hear that all the time. So if you listen really quietly, you can kind of hear them doing their scales or whatever in the background. All right, so let's move on. So this is on page 238. And I'm going to show you the different types of selectors, and I'm going to actually show you how to use the inspect element feature in Firefox that will actually speed along your styling process as you go in. You start writing CSS for your activities, for your project, everything that you're using CSS for. It's pretty nifty. All right, so first off, if you go to page 238, you kind of see this chart. I've kind of given you a representation of that chart here. As I go through this video, I'm going to actually try to show these on the left-hand side so you know where I'm at. So if one of them you know how to use already, you can actually scrub your video forward and maybe skip to other ones. So they should always be in view in this video. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if it's not, and I can do something different in the future. So right now, though, we want to start off by going over to, I'm going to actually bring up in my types.html page, and this is local on my computer. You can do this locally on your computer, or you can actually go to your actual website.com/practice and find types.html and play with it. But yeah, so that's what we're going to try to do here. So first off, we're going to right-click on this page, and we're in Firefox, and we're going to hit Inspect Element. That's going to bring open this menu here. Now, this menu has many different features. We're going to focus on two right now. First, it brings you off into the inspector, and this basically shows you an outline of your HTML page. All right, so you can kind of see that I've got a body, I've got a header, I've got a main. If I hit this little arrow, it actually opens up my main. I've got an article in there, and I've got all those other things. All right, so that's the first thing. Next one, if we come over here a little bit further to Style Editor, I can click on Style Editor, and this right off the bat is blank. So it says this page has no style sheet. Now, when you get into this first activity for this week, we'll actually show you how to create an external style sheet and connect it and write some CSS. And as soon as you have that connected, you'll actually come in here and you can actually start editing this, and it will actually edit your code right up here from the beginning. Right now that we don't have one, we're going to hit New. What this literally, or not literally does, but it kind of does, it makes shift you creating an external style sheet and connecting to your HTML, and then it lets you edit things. So I'm just going to hit New. It gives me a new document on this right side, and I can start editing things. So let's start off with the universal selector, and I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to underline this guy, and we'll move back over here. So if we're on universal selector, inside of the book, one thing that you might want to do is actually circle these portions of it. You'll notice for the universal selector, it's got the asterisks, and then it's got the curly brackets. The curly brackets have nothing to do with it. It's the asterisk which is the key character when you're using the universal selector. It's just like it sounds. Basically, it will grab everything when you go in there and use this. So I'm going to hit the asterisk, and I'm going to put a curly bracket. There we go. And I'm going to put an actual space in there. Anything I write in there. So if you remember, let's see if I can zoom in here. Remember from the reading, this would be my selector. This whole thing is a rule, a CSS rule. But I've got my selector. Inside, I've got my declaration, which is made up of two parts, which is the property and the value. These can be multiple different things. In this case, let's go color is my property, and then put a colon, and then we're going to say blue is my value. So if I come down and scroll down, you'll notice that everything turns blue because I use the selector of the universal selector, which literally grabs everything and changes it to be blue. I could do other things too. I could change the size and everything else. Now inside of a rule, you need the selector, and then you can have as many of these declarations as possible. So we could actually come in here and say something like, let's see, font, weight, bold, or anything else, and it will actually apply it there. One thing I want to do before we move on from the universal selector is I want to kind of solidify in your minds that every one of our tags that we've written is a box. Now, it's an invisible box, but it is a box nonetheless. So to show you this, on my universal selector, I'm going to say border, colon, 1 pixel, solid, black. And you'll notice here that every single one of my tags, every single one of those boxes now has a border on it so you can see what it looks like. There are tons of boxes here. Let's actually do one more thing. Margin is 15 pixels, and it will kind of show you how those are nested together. Now think of our indenting. Right here we've got our anchors, which is the small box around the links. So it's the A tag or the link tag. Around that we've got LIs, and that's this box here and that box there and this box here that's going all the way across. Above that is our unordered list, right? Above that is our navigation. And then above that is our header. And the header comes in and encompasses that logo, the H1, and that navigation. But you'll notice that these things are getting indented. So all of my list items, since they're inside the unordered list, get indented over. And I've got that box right there. So just think about this. These are boxes. Now, there's also a child-parent relationship. This anchor tag right here with home in it has a parent of the LI. The LI has a parent of UL. Each one of these LIs, since they all have the same parent, are siblings. So those are some things that you want to take into account as we go over all these selectors. All right, so that's the universal selector. I'm going to get rid of these borders, and I'm going to get rid of the color blue for now. We might come back to that later, but for now I'm just going to gut it all out. All right, coming back over here, let's go to our type selector. Our type selector is probably the selector that you're going to be using the most. The type selector is literally just the tag names or the keywords for our tags. So like H1 or H2 or H3. Those are only examples of them. You can use any of them. If we come back over here and view our page source, you can see we've got articles. So article could be a type. Main could be one right there, a type selector. Even inside of here, we got the EMs, the paragraphs, the I. So the key term in there can be used as the selector. So in here, let's actually type I, and then put the brackets in, and we're going to say color is blue. And you'll notice that all of my I, or my content with the I tags around it, turned to be blue. I can change this to be anything. If we say paragraph, it's going to grab all of those paragraphs and do the same thing. And notice that it will grab every paragraph. So whatever this selector matches, if there's multiple things that it matches, it will style everything the same way. All right, so that's the type selector. Let's move on. Let's go over here to the class selector. Now, let's talk about class and ID. Actually, let's get down to ID first. We've used ID already before on this. We used it for the bees and the blossom section. We used it for the in-page linking, all right? So an ID is a unique identifier. That meaning there can only be one, seeing that it's unique, and there should only be one. If we had a classroom full of students and we wanted Joe to stand up, it would be easy. I could say, Joe, stand up. But if there were two Joes, we would get confused on which one should stand up. More than likely, both of them would stand up. We don't want that. With an ID, it's a unique identifier, and we only want to select one thing at a time. So to make this, to show you this, inside of here in your book, you'll notice that it had pound introduction. Now, introduction has nothing to do with it other than it's a demonstration. It could be demo, or it could be SAM, or it could be nav, whatever you want. But the key word here, or the key character, is that pound sign. Basically what this says is, find an ID with the name of nav and select it. So as you're reading your CSS selectors, it's really shorthand. And you're just going in and you're reading what each of these spaces, characters, lack of spaces, or spaces actually mean. And they kind of just read out kind of like a sentence. All right, come back over here though. Let me demonstrate that. So we had bees and blossoms. We can put pound bees, and let's do background of yellow. And there we go. We've got the bees section with the background of that yellow. Now you'll notice that it's surrounding bees, that paragraph and that paragraph. That's because when we look, let's get off that. If we look over here, our bees is on a section tag. And so that section contains all of that content. That means that the background is being applied to the whole thing, and it goes behind all of that content there. Now, a class is very similar, all right? A class comes in, let's get rid of this real quick. A class comes in and it is a way of grouping things that are similar, and so that we can style them all the same. For instance, let's go back with our class example. We could classify the class as girls and boys. So if I said boys stand up, all the boys would stand up. If I said girls stand up, all the girls would stand up. We could even do multiple things, like 2 classes on one individual. So we could say any girl with blonde hair stand up, and that would narrow down our search. So in this case, we're using classes, and we just want to classify different HTML elements that would then be grouped together. So in here, note, once again, doesn't mean anything. It's a descriptive word that you choose when you create your class. And I'll show you creating a class in just a second. The key thing here is the period, and that means, hey, I need a class. Now, when you're working with CSS, you need 2 things for it to work. First, you need the tag or the ID or some kind of selector that's actually inside the HTML. Then you need to reference that inside of your CSS. So if pound bees, we'll grab it because we have pound bees here and we have pound bees in our HTML. If I say pound dogs, there is no ID of dogs on this page, so nothing will happen. You need to have those 2 connected to make it work. All right, now let me show you this. Let me pull open my text wrangler. Sorry, I didn't have that open before. Here's my page of the types.html. Now, let's come in here and we want to classify some things. Now, I don't have too good of an example at the moment. Sorry, I didn't prepare a little bit better here. But say we wanted the background of something to be red, all right? And we wanted multiple elements to have this background of red. So in here, I'm going to say the H2 class equals, and I'm going to say background BG red. All right, so we've got a class of background red. Now, where we want to do this on multiple things, a class would be good to use. If we only wanted to be a very specific item, it would be better to use an ID, like bees and blossoms. So we're going to classify our H2 with background of red. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to refresh the page. Because if I don't refresh the page, it's not going to pick up that. So I'm going to have to hit new again here. And now if I type in period, which is my class, in here it kind of tries to say, hey, here's all the different classes that are available to you. And one of them is BG red. So if we put in BG red, let me show you this where we are again. If we put in BG red, I can now say color, or let's do background because we're doing backgrounds, right? Background of red. And if we scroll up here, you'll notice, hey, that guy turned red because we have a selector of BG red tied to a hook in our HTML, which is our, right here, our class of our BG red. And then they connect and it puts it to be red. So let's come back one more time though. Inside of here, like I said, we can put this on multiple things and they will all be styled the same. So we could have on the H2 a class of BG red, and maybe on this LI we do a BG red, and maybe one last one, let's put it on this EM of a BG red. And let's save that again and come back over here, and we're going to refresh. So if I hit new again and I type in BG red, background is going to be red. You'll notice that it grabs everything with that class on it. So all those things. And all of these will be styled the same. If we say something like border, 1 pixel solid black, it will put a 1 pixel solid black on each of those different things. So that's a class. And so if we need multiple elements to be styled the same, we can get them to be styled the same. One thing, I should have said this at the beginning, when we start playing with CSS, my main goal for you is to be as lazy as possible. That means if you don't have to put an ID on everything, I don't want you to put an ID on everything because we don't want to repeat similar code. So I wouldn't put an ID here and an ID here, an ID here, and then put the same code right here on each of those IDs. I could do that, but once again, I want you to be as lazy as possible. All right, so that's classes. Let's get rid of this, and let's move on to child. All right, so these get a little bit more complex as we go along. All right. Oh wait, let's leave that in there. One other thing you might want to take note of, you can, in your CSS, you can have as many of these rules as you want. So I can keep writing these in here, and they'll just be, keep on attaching style to these selectors, of whichever one I want to select it to. All right, so child, we have to think back, and we want, let's come in here, let's go asterisk, border, 1 pixel solid black. And we want to do margin of 15 pixels, just to show us this visual again. You don't have to do this every time, but this is kind of a nice visual. So you'll notice here that we have a home, which is the anchor tag, surrounded by an li, surrounded by, what's this guy here, an unordered list, and then a nav. So that we have a nav that has, let's actually go to ul. We have a ul that has a child of an li, all right? So let's play with that. So over here, as we come in here, we can say ul, and the key word for child, or the key character, is this bracket right here. And so you want to use the angle bracket. You want to use that. It doesn't matter if we're using li. This is just a selector and a selector saying this is the parent, this is the child. And that's all it's talking about. That's just a demonstration. So over here, we can say, well, the parent's the ul. I want to find a child that's an li. And I want to say the background is going to be yellow. All right? And you'll notice that in this case, it grabbed the ul and it grabbed the li that was a child of that. Now, you might ask, why don't you just grab the li? That makes more sense, right? So we come down here, we'll notice that, hey, these guys are also doing, let's get the background red so we can see that it's grabbing that. So ul, li, since we have found a ul, there's a ul here and there's li's, that's our children there. So each one it's selecting, and it's got that same effect. We can use this, though, if we want to say something like, hey, we want a nav, and then we have a ul, and then an li. So this one has a nav, then it has a ul, and then it has an li. If we come down here, this one's no longer yellow because we don't have a nav around it. So we can use this kind of specify a little bit more we can be a little bit more specific on what we want to grab and what we don't want to grab. We could even do one more if you want, and it comes in kind of handy. We could say header nav ulli, which would grab a nav or an li's in a header, but it wouldn't grab them in the footer if we had them in the footer. Now, you might say, hey, that's a little bit excessive to have all those different things. We can do one more thing, which comes back to coming in under this child. We're not going to play with the child. We're going to play with descendant. When we get to descendant, it's a little bit different. 1 second. All right, so once we get to descendant, it's going to be a little bit different. Sorry about that pause. A descendant's kind of like a child. And we come in, and basically, this header has a child of a nav, and so that could be termed a descendant. But our great-grandchild of the li's, or the ul, could also be termed as a descendant. So it's a little bit more vague. So instead of saying header, find the child that's a nav, find a child that's a ul, find a child that's an li, we could actually just say, hey, find a header that has an li and grab that li right there. Or find a header that has a descendant that's an li and grab the li and style it. Now, you'll notice that that's what that is. That's that little space right there. And that's what a descendant selector is doing. This does come in really handy in practice with making our navigations and changing them and styling them a little bit different in the future. But that's how it works. All right, going on. Let's get rid of this descendant. Let's come into the adjacent sibling. So this one's interesting too. Now we're going to use, let's go down a little bit further. Let's use this, the bees section. So we've got a section that encompasses the H2 of bees, the paragraph, and then that second paragraph there. So these could be termed bees is a sibling of this paragraph, and this is a sibling of that paragraph also. Now, what adjacent sibling means is we want to find something that has a sibling that's right after it. So in this case, the adjacent sibling to bees would be this first paragraph. The adjacent sibling to this first paragraph would be the second paragraph, and so forth. These do get into be a little bit more advanced selectors, though they do come in handy. So you will be quizzed. Well, the demonstration will show you and have you do these things. You probably won't use these as much, but they do come in handy once you get a little bit further into CSS. So let's demonstrate this real quick. We're going to use the same thing as background yellow, but we're going to change the selector. So we want to grab this paragraph, and actually let's don't do background of yellow. Let's go margin left is say 200 pixels. All right. So we got margin left 200 pixels. So this whole box is going to move over to the right 200 pixels. And we'll talk about more of these property values later in the week. But that's what this one's going to do. So here we can say H2. Right now, it will grab the H2, right? But we don't want the H2. We want the adjacent sibling to the H2. So then we push plus. So you notice that it's no longer grabbing it because it knows that that's not our goal. And then we push P. And you'll notice it says find an H2 that has an adjacent sibling, that's a paragraph, and change the margin left to be 200 pixels. And it will do that to everything that meets those parameters. So try that out. It's kind of handy to use. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is the general sibling. So the plus sign was the adjacent sibling. The general sibling is just a little less specific. So we come in here, and instead of using a plus, we're going to use the tilde. Now the tilde is over here, this guy right here. You can find that on your keyboard usually, very top left, right under like escape. And you hold down shift and push the tab, or push that button, and it brings it in for you. But we're going to put it in here, and really what this is going to do is it's going to say find an H2, and then, so we grab these H2s that have any sibling that is a paragraph, and select all of those and move them over 200 pixels. So if we change the little plus sign to be a tilde, instead of just grabbing the next one, it's going to grab all of its siblings, if it was before or after or wherever else. But notice that it didn't grab itself because it's not a sibling of itself. It is itself. So anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at. So a general sibling. This one you probably won't use as much. This one can come in handy. Say maybe you want to indent the first paragraph right after an H2. Really gets back to be as lazy as possible because we want you not to write as much code as you need to. That didn't come out the most smooth, but yeah, you want to write as little code as possible to get the same effect. So those are really the selectors in the book. Hopefully this is helpful, that as you ran through it, you kind of saw how it was working, how you were moving along. Now, know that if you get a style sheet up, I'll make a different video that kind of shows you. You can actually save this if you're working from your desktop right here, not on the web. And it'll actually update it for you. But that's pretty cool. But anyway, those are the main selectors, and hopefully it's been helpful. And we'll talk to you later.